Well, hello everyone. It's such a joy to be with you sharing this time. But this is a lovely chance for me to share some of the most intimate music that I sing and that I hold very dear. So, over the next half hour, I'll be singing songs from 17th century England with the composers Purcell, Dowland, and Morley. And I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to the pieces before we do a few at a time. So we'll start with Henry Purcell, who lived a short life of 36 years in the late 1600s and was nevertheless a really prolific composer and widely regarded as the finest composer of English song and theatre music. At the age of 20, he was appointed as organist at Westminster Abbey, and 2 years later, at 22, to the Royal Chapel. He's known for gorgeous sacred music and choral music and chamber music and orchestral music, but above all, he was a composer for the theatre. You may be familiar with his only full opera, Dido and Aeneas, but he also wrote incidental music to accompany plays for several theatre productions. He is affectionately known as the English Orpheus because of his extraordinary talent of setting the English language to music. Purcell understood the evocation of drama, the inherent pacing and meter and rhythm of the English language, and a way to set that was just so beautiful to the listener. Some of his most famous songs were published in a collection called, aptly, Orpheus Britannicus, and many of these songs would have originated from the playhouse A Drury Lane or Dorset Garden. So we begin with probably one of his most famous, Sweeter Than Roses, in which we celebrate the afterglow of a kiss so memorable it is at once freezing and fire. It comes from the play Pausanias, where it acts as a prelude to essentially a rather steamy scene. Purcell would have been exposed to the music of Italian masters like Monteverdi and Carissimi, and his music, especially in this song, shows that influence of Italian virtuosity and recitative-like flow of text. The next one in the set, Music for a While, comes from the play Oedipus by Dryden and Lee. This is a really interesting song. It's sung in the play to bewitch and disarm the soul of one of its characters. There's even a reference to Alecto, one of the Furies, with snakes for hair and a whip in her hand, and yet this music will beguile even Alecto for a while. And finally, the last in this first set, Fairest Isle, which comes from the semi-opera King Arthur. Dryden, who also wrote the text for Music for a While for Oedipus, is quoted in contemporary accounts as saying, "We have at length found an Englishman equal with the best abroad." The final act of this play, from which Fairest Isle comes, is a patriotic masque in celebration of the triumph of King Arthur, and by extension, a chance to relive the glory of England over the past 1,000 years, which have been about the 5th to the 16th century. And even Venus and Cupid join in choosing this Fairest Isle as their favorite nation. So here is Sweeter Than Roses, Music for a While, and Fairest Isle. First trembling made me freeze. Made me freeze. Then shot like fire, oh, oh, oh. Then shot like fire, oh, then shot like fire, oh, oh. that blow the fire of love. Soft repulses, kind disdain, shall be all the pains you prove. Every swing shall be his duty, grateful every nymph shall prove. And as these excel in beauty, those shall be renowned for love.
Sherry, I want to share with you that we have some listeners from all over the place.
I'm going to turn my mic up a little bit. We move next to the composers Morley and Dowland with 3 songs. Both Morley and Dowland were born in the mid-16th century, and both were renowned composers of lute songs. Morley flourished at the height of the Elizabethan era and was notable not only for music composition, but interestingly also for pushing the cause of music publishing, specifically for secular songs, and madrigals for home consumption, as we're doing today. Morley was a chorister at St. Paul's Cathedral in London and later employed at the Chapel Royal, just as Henry Purcell would be some decades later. So the song by Morley is It Was a Lover and His Lass, a classic English song of the celebration of springtime, merriment, hey nonny nonny, wooing, the anticipation of romance, play on words like ring time, which could mean wedding bells ringing or wedding rings. The text might be familiar to Shakespeare fans out there. It's from As You Like It. And one of the more fascinating conjectures of this period is whether Shakespeare and Morley actually knew each other. We know that they lived quite close to each other in Bishopsgate, and that this was an area where a lot of artists and musicians lived, and playwrights, and were frequent collaborators with each other. And Morley's setting of It Was a Lover and His Lass could possibly have appeared in Shakespeare's play during Shakespeare's lifetime. We really don't have a lot of examples of printed music that would have been performed in Shakespeare's play during his life, so it's very tempting to imagine and to hope that they met each other and collaborated on this piece, but the historians are still duking this one out. And we go then in the set to John Dowland, regarded as the finest composer of English lute songs. Very well known in his day, he traveled to France and Germany and Italy and Denmark in the late 1590s. He was in fact the highest paid musician at the Danish court, and finally was appointed in England as royal lutenist in about 1612. And interestingly, like Morley, he was also active in the cause of music publishing. He even in fact devised a format in which a piece of music could be laid flat with 4 people on each side. So each part of the music was facing in a different direction, which meant that everybody could read from one score instead of having different part books, something that really hadn't been done until then. Come Again, Sweet Love, the first song by Dowland, is a familiar tune. It's where the singer is filled with the prospect and excitement of seeing and touching the beloved, and you'll hear that in the music with sort of this breathlessness that's built into the little refrain that keeps popping up. And I'll end this set of 3 with Flow My Tears, widely considered Dowland's most famous song, and it's based on his signature tune called the Lacrimae Pavan. Lacrimae refers to tears or sorrow, and a pavan is a piece that's based on a kind of dance in duple meter, in 2. This piece was such a wild success in Dowland's lifetime. He rearranged it for strings, for a consort of viols, for multiple singers, for solo singer, just for lute. And it has sort of a recognizable, that lacrimae, the sorrowful tear part of it in the opening phrase, a descending line which you'll hear. And in fact, it was so famous that John Dowland started signing his name, John Dowland di Lacrimae, John Dowland, the guy who wrote Lacrimae. So here are It Was a Lover and His Lass, Come again, sweet love, and flow my tears. It was a lover and his lass with a hey and a ho and a hey, nonny no, and a hey, nonny nonny no. That all the green cornfields did pass in springtime, in springtime, in springtime, the only pretty ringtime, when birds do sing, hey ding a ding a ding, hey ding a ding a ding, hey ding a ding a ding. Sweet lovers love the spring in springtime. In springtime, the only pretty ringtime, when birds do sing, hey ding a ding a ding, hey ding a ding a ding, hey ding a ding a ding. Sweet lovers love the spring. Between the acres of the rye, with a hey and a ho and a hey, nonny no, and a hey, nonny nonny no. These pretty country fools did lie in springtime, in springtime, in springtime, the only pretty ringtime, when birds do sing, hey ding a ding a ding, hey ding a ding a ding, hey ding a ding a ding. Sweet lovers love the spring in springtime. In springtime, the only pretty ringtime, when birds do sing, hey ding a ding a ding, hey ding a ding a ding, hey ding a ding a ding. Sweet lovers love the spring. Then pretty lovers take the time, with a hey and a ho and a hey, nonny no, and a hey, nonny nonny no. For love is crowned with the pride in springtime, in springtime, in springtime, the only pretty ringtime, when birds do sing, hey ding a ding a ding, hey ding a ding a ding, hey ding a ding a ding. Sweet lovers love the spring in springtime. In springtime, the only pretty ringtime, when birds do sing, hey ding a ding a ding, hey ding a ding a ding, hey ding a ding a ding. Sweet lovers love the spring. Come again, sweet love doth now invite thy graces that refrain to do me due delight, to see, to hear, to touch, to kiss, to die with thee again in sweetest sympathy. To see, to hear, to touch, to kiss, to die with thee again in sweetest sympathy. Come again, that I may cease to mourn for thy unkind disdain, for now left and forlorn. I sit, I sigh, I weep, I faint, I die in deadly pain and endless misery. I sit, I sigh, I weep, I faint, I die in deadly pain and endless misery. Gentle love, draw forth thy wounding dart. Thou canst not pierce her heart, for I that to approve. Thy sighs and tears more hot than all thy shafts did tempt, while she for mighty triumph laughs. Thy sighs and what then thy shafts did tempt while she for mighty triumph laughs. Through my tears, flow from your springs, exiled forever, let me mourn. When night's black bird her sad infamy sings, let me live forlorn. Down vain lights shine you no more. No nights are dark enough for those that in despair their lost fortunes deplore. Night doth but shame disclose. Never may my woes be relieved, since pity is fled, and tears and sighs and groans, my weary days, of all joys have deprived. From the highest spire of contentment, my fortune is thrown, and fear and grief and pain for my deserts, all my hope since hope is gone. Hark, you shadows that in darkness dwell, unto condemn light. Happy, happy they that in hell feel not the worst despite. Hark, you shadows that in darkness dwell, unto contemn light. Happy, happy they that in hell feel not the world's despite. I'll close today with two more songs by Purcell. Nymphs and Shepherds comes from the play The Libertine by Shadwell on the subject of Don Juan. This is another song of springtime celebration, country folk reveling in spring dances and rural pleasures. Everything is fresh and innocent in a verdant grove. And finally, the song Evening Hymn, a great personal favorite of mine, very dear to my heart, with words by William Fuller, in fact, the Bishop of London. The song comes from a publication called Harmonia Sacra from 1693, 2 years before the death of Purcell. It's a gentle, lilting evening prayer, placing the singer in the hands of God and ending with a rapturous and yet very intimate hallelujah. Nymphs and shepherds, come away, come away. Nymphs and shepherds, come away, come away, come away. In the groves, let's sport and play, let's sport and play, let's sport and play. For this is Flora's holiday, this is Flora's holiday. Thank you so much for spending this afternoon with me. It's been such a pleasure to be with you today. Be well, stay healthy, show some support for the musicians in your life if you can, the artists that you know and love. And I hope we're all able to sing and play and attend live concerts together whenever is safe and humanly possible. Thank you again to Maine Public Radio, and I will toss it back to you, Robin.
Thank you so much, Sherezade. You are just such a delight, and what a virtuoso. It's just been a pleasure. Thanks to all of you for coming, and we hope to see you next week.